Have you ever wondered why money and the state are so tangled up? And what that actually means for your future. In this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I'm joined by Pascal Hügli, a Swiss journalist, educator, and co-author of the book, The Bitcoin Enlightenment.
Maybe as an investor, this all sounds really fatalistically bullish, more money printing, more money into Bitcoin, and that's why number go up. For me, Bitcoin is really a way to look for truth, because it's something that, as we said, it challenges many traditional narratives.
As the host of the podcast Less Noise, More Signal, he has a front row seat to the clash between old school finance and a Bitcoin revolution. I really enjoyed this conversation with Pascal, and I hope that you do too. If you do, please like and subscribe here on YouTube or follow me on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. I appreciate the support. Now let's dive into this episode. How did your journey go from, getting into Bitcoin to eventually teaming up with Ricardo Salinas, who's a Mexican billionaire, and I think he has like 80 or 90% of his net worth in Bitcoin, or a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You co-wrote a book with him called the Bitcoin Enlightenment. So maybe take us a bit through that arc of getting into Bitcoin to eventually publishing a book with this Mexican billionaire.
No, that's great. Yeah. Thanks for inviting. It's also a great podcast that I listen to that you have, and so it's just really great to be on the show. Well, I mean, this goes back around to 2015, I guess. That's when I really when my Bitcoin journey started. It was actually in the US at the Mises University. Maybe some people are familiar with it. It's like a summer school that the Mises Institute, which is like a think tank for Austrian economics and libertarianism in the US, in Auburn, Alabama. That's where I was as a summer school student. And there, obviously, they told me about Bitcoin. There was this guy, Patrick Burns. He was like, for me, the original sailor. Even though he didn't buy Bitcoin with his company, it was really... like he already with Overstock, it's like the IKEA of the United States. As far as I know, he was already accepting Bitcoin in 2013 or something. And so he was really evangelizing Bitcoin, and that's how I really got into the topic. I was hooked immediately. That's what I can say, because I was already studying Austrian economics and the whole libertarian philosophy for quite some time during my universities or studies at universities. And so when I heard about Bitcoin, which was only in 2015, I didn't really hear about it before it, but there I really got orange pill within a week, during that summer school, also talking to some people like co-students and fellows and stuff. And so it was only 1 week in the US that really got me going. And from there, I started digging deeper myself, really wanted to unravel what's going on here with that Bitcoin thing, always with an Austrian economics lens, with a monetary historian lens as well, because that's what I was interested most myself. And so, then I started working as a journalist, covering the entire space, like Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto, just because they were looking for somebody. But I thought, like, okay, this is a way to make my passion into a job as well, to earn some money off of that. And that sort of worked. That was then 2017-ish, I think. And then in 2020, when COVID came around in Europe, it yourself, like a lot of countries over here were shutting down, and it was all like crazy in Europe. And that's where me and my friend and even my wife, we decided to go traveling as a digital nomad, or sovereign individual, how we would like to call it. And so that's where we left everything here in Switzerland, closed down our contract with the apartment, sold our car. So we were really on the go, just living out of our suitcases. And we did go to Mexico, and there I was just Googling online to look for a person that I could talk to in terms of all things Bitcoin. And that's where Ricardo Salinas obviously showed up on the internet. And then I was like, okay, how can I get that guy, to talk to him? And we contacted his company, and for some reason, because I maybe had the opportunity to share with him my Austrian background and also dropped some quotes about Mises and Hayek. That's probably why it resonated with him, and that's why he also agreed to meet us, which was to the great surprise of his entire team, because they were like CNBC, Bloomberg, they are all contacting him, and then he turns down everything, and you little guy show along, and he just wants to meet. And we were like, it's probably because of the whole Austrian background that I had. And so that's how it unfolded. We did a YouTube, which is a video on YouTube. It's still up on YouTube. It went somewhat viral, talking about Bitcoin and stuff. And from there, then also the book developed. And so, that's how we find ourselves today here, talking about that book as well.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think if I learned one thing in my career is that you should send the message, right? Because many people don't. And the fact that you do already makes you stand out. So I absolutely love that. All right. So, the book is called The Bitcoin Enlightenment. It is about Salinas' story, his life, entrepreneurship into Bitcoin. And, one big takeaway from the book is that money has always been tangled up with the state. I think this is also like a topic that is discussed in this Mises summer school, right? I think the Austrians are very much against that, obviously. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of like walk us through some of examples that hit home for you? I think, like, why is there a small group of centralized people that determine the value of the technology we use to exchange value with each other? That doesn't really sound right. And a lot of people just are like, yeah, okay, whatever. But can we make that a bit more serious? Like, what made that like click for you, or what showed you the importance of separating that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, as I said, I've been studying monetary history for quite some time, and obviously I went down the Austrian economics road, so to say. And this is really, I would say, where it clicked for me is really that the Austrians, they have always been focusing on or taking sort of a value neutral take, and saying like, okay, this is how humans function, this is how they sort of act. And if you extrapolate this, this is probably what you can suppose will sort of happen, and there obviously you always have this counteracting force of other people wanting to control the actions of others. And this to some extent doesn't really feel natural to me, because like just coming from myself, I want to be a free person. I know it in probably my friends as well. Then if you look at kids, they want to be free. They want to be able to experiment and learn the hard way sometimes, but they want to be really out in the open, and that's where it clicked for me. Like, the Austrians are really the ones who probably describe human beings the best in terms of how they act, and then obviously come at the conclusion that the system as it is today, especially when it comes to monetary fiat system, that this is also sort of an overarching, overbearing system, that's controlling us, even though sometimes, as you said, many people don't know, and it's maybe not that we really feel it in our lives directly, because we have nobody who's telling us, at least until now, how we should spend our money. It's all done through this more secret, hidden away way, how it is actually done through a system at large. So it's more systematically than really individually. But that's where it really clicked for me, and that's why I really think that this is an important, I would say, endeavor, that the Austrians and people aligned with them have had for so many decades now, that they're pointing to this, that it's not sort of the natural state, I would say, in terms of how humans probably act. And that's probably why it clicked for me, and why I also am being drawn to Bitcoin itself. Yeah.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. So why do you think a lot of our generational peers that maybe still have high trust of government just don't want to see this? Like when I realized the government is just made up of other people, then it really got me thinking like, okay, but what are they doing for me, right? Like why do governments cling on to the control of the money for so long? Do you think that is just power, or is there something deeper? And why do you think people find that so hard to see?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I mean, in the end, what I just said is really, it's sort of human nature that we want to be free, you know, that we want to do it our own way, that we want to act independently. That's certainly one trait of our nature. At the same time, and that's what I've been learning as well, like studying Bitcoin, studying human psychology and everything, we probably do have some sort of trait within us that also makes us crave authority, you know, even though as Bitcoiners and maybe people, freedom-loving people, they don't like to hear this, you know. But that's what I've encountered or what I have been encountering times and times again, you know, that people, they sort of crave authority because sometimes they feel like they cannot be independent, they cannot be self-responsible, you know, because it's sort of too dangerous. They want to offload that responsibility to somebody else, because responsibility, as we said, it comes with self-responsibility. You then are sort of your own boss, and when you make mistakes, you have nobody to blame for. And if you can offload the trust and then the responsibility and everything, you have somebody to blame for, you know, and you don't have to care about stuff. And you can maybe also sort of like a crybaby then run to the state and say, well, help me out here, you know, I haven't been able to cater to my own needs and really sort of just make sure I survive, sort of putting it this way. So I think that's another trait, as I said, that I struggle with myself. I think, or I struggle with as a Bitcoiner, as a freedom-loving person. But it's also a trait that's just normal, and that's probably why, in the end, government, as it is, has managed to always have this grip over money and over a lot of other things in our lives, you know. And it's also because maybe sometimes we Bitcoiners then scratch our head and like, why is nobody speaking up against this? This is sort of weird. Don't you guys see it? And the other people are maybe subconsciously thinking, at least, well, it's the safer trade, you know, it's the least the least resistant way to go about, if I can just offload my responsibility to some more anonymous entity like the state or whatever it is. And so I think that's another trait that I've had to learn myself, and that's sort of the dichotomy where I find myself in today, also as a Bitcoin, you know, at the on one side, I'm really this freedom-loving person, or rooting for free money and free market money. But at the other side, I'm like, well, maybe that's not so realistic after all. And maybe that's not where we're going also in 10, 20, 200 plus years. You know, this utopian Bitcoinized world that everyone is believing of or hoping for. Maybe we're not going to end up like this, because human beings are just not like this. And I don't have a definite answer, because I don't know. Maybe we have also really unlearned taking responsibility, and we have to really relearn it again. But at the same time, like, if I look at human history, maybe humans have always been like this. So that makes me cautiously optimistic, so to say, if we ever will live in a hyper-Bitcoinized world, And so, that's probably my 2 cents here.
I think for me, like, this was always somewhere, but I really see Bitcoin as the tool that gave me the insight to another possibility, I would say. I think you probably know the article from Jesse Myers, Why the Yuppie Elite Dismisses Bitcoin, right? And the core of that is basically, you either have high trust or low trust on institutions, right? And that combined with what you said, I think perfectly, is that outsourcing of responsibility is basically something that you grow up with, in a sense. Like, there isn't really, at least in my perception in Western Europe, definitely, it's about, everything is well aligned, everything is well taken care of. Of course, you put your money in the bank. When you're the age of 9, you get this letter at home that says, like, hey, do you want to have like a children's bank account? Like stuff like that. I think this is how we are really brought up.
Yeah, and you're making a great point here. I mean, in the end, the way our system is built today, it's also maybe if you want to really go down, if you want to go astray, and you want to do things differently, it's sort of hard, because like that's what you usually hear. Like if you talk to people and you tell them, well, we don't really live in a free society, so to say, everyone, like 10 or 9 out of 10 friends of mine would probably call me a lunatic and tell me, well, you live in Switzerland, you're very free, and to some extent, this is certainly true. If I compare myself to countries that are a lot worse, like North Korea or other regions in the world. So I'm like, yeah, that's definitely true. But at the same time, I think even we here in Western Europe, and then I can speak for Switzerland as well, live in this golden cage, where we feel like as long as you don't move, you don't feel the chains, that are attached to your arms, and then it's like, okay, only if you start moving. And I experienced this when I wanted to go abroad, as I said, as a digital nomad, and I wanted to kind of say farewell to the old system, and then also tax-wise sort of decouple myself and just see what's possible. Then you find yourself in an area where it's a lot of gray area, because you feel like, okay, you don't know what's right, what's wrong, like legally. And you also find that a lot of people are then sort of considering you as a social outcast. When I actually left the country and then I did this in Switzerland, I wrote an article with the biggest boulevard magazine, telling me why I'm fed up with the system and why I'm leaving. And I did it. I wrote it about like, okay, see this system that I'm in, it's all systematically flawed, fiat, I can't do anything about it. Everything gets debased. That's why I'm in a system that I can't really like progress. There's a lot of heavy weight that's put on me. Just to start off, and it's with a lot of millennials and other people as well. And when I pointed this out, and I wrote this, I wrote this article, or I have to say I prepared for this article and then wrote it. It took me like 2 months, because I wanted it to be bulletproof, all the arguments. I actually have to reread it now that I'm talking about it, what I wrote back then, But I put a lot of effort into that article, and then it was so crazy that all the reactions that I got, like 90% was like, wow, you are somewhat of a outcast, you don't believe in society, you leave us behind, and you are a how do we call it, a Scrooge or whatever, like somebody who a sponge, who lives off a system but doesn't really contribute and stuff, and so I was really attacked for pointing this out. And this also showed me, yeah, it's really hard to go against an existing system because people will hate on you, and a lot of people don't like swimming against the tides, because they want to be with their group, with their peer group. They want to stay in line. And so I think that's another reason for why things don't really change, because people just don't like change and don't like if other people vouch for change, and so you're artificially being put down, so to say.
I don't know if we talked about that before this talk or that I saw it, but you have this modern monetary theory, right? That a lot of smart economists, PhD type people talk about, right? And it's kind of an attempt at like a philosophical explanation, I would say, almost at how the fiat money system works. And so their lens on it basically is that they say, governments cannot run out of money because they can print it into infinity. Where I think people that have studied this and are into Bitcoin would say, well, that is exactly the problem. And these people say, no, this is exactly the solution. Like we can never go broke. So my question is like, how do you look at this? Like just this dichotomy of like this emotion on the one side and this more objective truth seeking, trying to be in a dialogue, right? Like find a shared truth, etc.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. I mean, for me, Bitcoin is really a way to look for truth, because it's something that, as we said, it challenges many like traditional narratives, and that's why you're sort of bound and obliged to dig deeper. At some point, what I figured is also then maybe, and it's again because most people aren't like this, they don't want to dig too deep, because at some point you want to also get your confirmation bias just be sort of be accepted all the time or be reconfirmed, and so that's what I figured out. Even in Bitcoin, some people then might not do the homework even, and that's especially when it comes to the MMT topic. And let me maybe explain, because I myself, I'm a Bitcoiner, and I really think the MMT guys, they have it backwards in the sense of like they sort of exclude an entire history of money up until the gold standard. They're just saying, okay, they're looking at money from today's lens, how it actually functions. And then they're like, okay, look, it has always been like this. The whole story about market developing money, it's all bogus. It can't be right, because today we don't have it. And I think that's really throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to say. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, if I look at today's system, and I did it extensively researching the book, that we write, the Bitcoin Enlightenment, because I was really looking at this MMT thing because I wanted to understand it more closely. I figured like, okay, these guys, they're spot on when it comes to today's system, Ever since the 1970s, when Bitcoin or when fiat was really decoupled from gold, we actually did move into a system which is very much MMT-like, because government, they can just sort of go into ever more debt. There's the debt ceiling, which is not really a ceiling because it's being pushed out again indefinitely. So if you really look at this system, I mean, it's full fiat already today, and they can print up the money if they want to, and in that sense, they're really right. And it's probably also when you only look at the fiat system and you want to go back to a gold standard, I would even agree with them. It's probably hard, because change within the system doesn't work. I think that boat has sort of sailed, it really has to come from outside. And that's again where maybe Bitcoin could be the solution, like the old, I call it the old world now with Bitcoin, that the monetary sanity will at some point be sort of pushed upon, imposed on the old system again, just because it can't bear it anymore without being attached to some real money, so to say. But in that sense, I'm like, okay, that's where I find myself in today. As I said, like the MMT guys, I feel like they're really close to reality. I mentioned this to you, I think, before the call. That's why you maybe brought it up. I watched this movie, Finding the Money, which is really this documentary where these MMT guys are sort of depicted. And when you listen and watch this documentary, you really get a feeling like they go through the same struggles that Bitcoiners go through, because none of the economists from the traditional system, like the mainstream economists, they don't take the MMT people serious until at least until now, not yet, and so they're laughed off like Bitcoiners, and I have the feeling that maybe in 5 to 10 years, MMT will also be mainstream among the mainstream. I don't even think that it is mainstream nowadays, even though I believe the system already works that way, And so I feel like, okay, when I look at reality, I feel the MMT guys, it will only get worse, so to say, because they will only be proved right in the end. But this then doesn't mean for me that I think they're right on a fundamental level, and that everything else, like Bitcoin and like money developed or market developed money, cannot exist. I'm very much of the belief that this has its merit as well. And so I believe both theories are sort of right at the same time. They just look at different things and sometimes even talk past each other, So that's sort of my belief that I have.
Well, I think they see the same problem, but their solution is do more of it. Basically, like just let it go, just print into infinity, right? Where the word I'm thinking of, what I learned along the way, is the word nominally, right? Like, yes, you can pay off your debt nominally, like make the numbers go down because you print a lot of units, but that doesn't get us to a good place, And I feel that is so basic that I'm constantly kind of mind blown by the fact that these people that are serious, PhD economic people, they don't see that. And maybe my argument is very simplistic here, but I wonder what you think. Like, it is classic. It is like a classic corporate type-ish solution to not addressing the problem and going, from fundamentals back up. It's like putting a Band-Aid on it and basically just ever ignoring how that problem came to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's probably the right way. I mean, they're sort of, as I said, they're of the belief that a market-based money and tying money to anything real, whether it be gold or Bitcoin or let it be a commodity as well, just anything that's sort of a resource that's tangible. Even though, again, with Bitcoin, some people say it's not a tangible resource. But it's a synthetic commodity. That's how it's structured and built. And I think they are arguing this boat has sailed, and that's why we never want to go back to this world. We don't even think of that world anymore. It's just wrong, And that's why I fundamentally disagree with them, because I think the world doesn't change in its most fundamental structure, It's probably... I'm reminded of this Ayn Rand quote where you can say you can ignore reality, you can ignore the consequences of reality, but you cannot ignore the consequences of reality all the time, so to say,
Exactly.
Something like this, I think, is a quote. And that's I think, pretty right, that at some point reality will kick in again, but and so it's probably the way that they will be right until they're not right anymore, and until they're not right anymore, they are right. And that's why it's so hard to argue against them. I would say if you stay within their framework, you stay on their turf, and on their turf, Bitcoin doesn't even exist, and that's why it's probably hard to also convince them. But if you think outside the box and across the borders of we call it the plate, then it's sort of okay. You can see maybe other things as well, like Bitcoin, and that's probably it. I would argue.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order. It's interesting because with Bitcoin, it's the other way around. Like, they are wrong. We are wrong until we are right, I would say.
Yeah.
But I think that's the battle that we're in. And, that's, of course, what we're trying to do. What both of us are trying to do is just tell more people about this, right? So I think this, the MMT stuff, and just I think the almost global ignorance towards how fiat money is trending to zero, how it's basically a failure, I think is one thing that our generation really needs to understand. But on the other side, and you also you sent this to me up front. I had to look this up, but I thought it was very interesting. You said, that we are in a super interesting time where there are four forces aligning. Basically, it's called the four Fs from Ben Kiesenchuk.
Yeah, exactly. He's
I didn't know who that was. But the four Fs are fiscal dominance, financial repression, passive flows, and fiat money. Mm-hmm. And while all these elements have existed historically, they've never been at work together. Can you kind of break that down for us? Why is this very important to understand as to what is happening right now?
Yes, that's great that you're pointing this out. So I have to give props to where props are due. And I said it's a framework that this guy, Ben Kiesenchuk, developed. He's a Ukrainian, I think, by name, but born in Canada. I had him on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he developed this framework. And I'm learning myself as we speak here. Every day I learn more about it. But I felt it so compelling because he's also an MMT guy. He's an MMT supporter, and I had him on my show, and some of my Bitcoin friends were like, "Oh, dude, who are you interviewing here? This is the devil himself," so to say, and I was like, yes, awesome. But I want to understand, and I had him on the show because I felt like he's so correct in articulating today's system, even though, as I said again, with many of his conclusions, I would not agree. He was speaking of a post-scarcity world. This is typical for MMT guys, like a world where nothing will be scarce anymore, because we've gone to a point where we can produce everything. We sort of live in la la land, and I don't agree with this at all. But it was just interesting to hear what he was arguing. And so he's basically arguing that we have this fiscal dominance, it's called. I think Lynn Alden has been all over this as well, really pointing out that the governments themselves have been really taking up the baton when it comes to credit growth as well, when it comes to stimulating the economy. And he sort of said it probably changed with the great financial crisis in 2008, and now it really accelerated with COVID, where we saw the last time where a lot of stimulus came directly from the government, and so that's where he says, we're really in this full fiscal dominance mode by now, where government in the US is also having these government deficits, of 7 to 8% and consistently. So that's what he's been arguing. At the same time, we have the financial repression, because that's something we really need to have if we have that large of deficits, because the open market might not be financing all of this, and so you have to make sure that money is also channeled and funneled into government bonds, in the end, to sort of have fiscal dominance going on. And there, all these sort of regulations are coming in, the way bank regulations are structured, the way pension funds have to be allocated to government bonds, all these sorts of things that people are going through and thinking through. So that's another pillar. And then the third one, he says, is really these passive flows, with the ETF industries. Or industry, a lot has changed in financial markets, because nowadays a lot of people are just investing through like passive mandates, where once you get your paycheck, 30% from your paycheck is automatically funneled into some type of passive instrument, an ETF or something, and the more people that do this, the more money is just allocated passively in a sort of socialized manner as well, or socialism manner, because you don't really look for the value in companies anymore. You just buy the index, And who's profiting the most from this? It's obviously the big companies, the Mag 7, who get a disproportionate amount of money. And that's why they get stronger. And the fourth one is fiat, sort of, that everything is fiat now, detached from any sort of real resource. Money can be printed out of thin air. And he says historically this has never happened all at once. And that's why today's system is different than before.
But what does it tell you that it's all happening at once? Is this like converging on the ending of this fiat money system, as a lot of similar systems have failed in the past? I cannot repeat that enough, by the way, that when we talk about this stuff, this is not unique, right? The age of what we think is our money is nothing in the eternity of the existence of money in the world, right? Like it is a made up thing. By the way, the Mag 7 get 34% of all passive inflows of the S&P 500, which is 500 companies, right? So
it's crazy,
what I take away from what you just said is this is all to keep the Ponzi going, basically. 2 days ago, I had a thread on Twitter where I talked with Grok, where I said, nice. Okay, compare fiat money and Bitcoin, and what the probability is of fiat money being a Ponzi. So the probability of fiat money being a Ponzi compared to Bitcoin is like 6 times higher. And we had this whole thread that has over 750,000 views on X.
Nice.
But what you are explaining is what keeps this Ponzi going, right? And I think this is one of these layers that you come across when you peel down this onion. But I think, I mean, I was shocked when I learned this, I have to say, like just being so unaware. I think that is the most shocking part for me. That and many people just don't know that this is how it works. They think it's all positive and everything goes up and we're being productive and all these things. But I think what we're seeing is actually the breakdown slowly. I mean, this fiscal dominance part, for example, is basically holding the US very tight.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you're exactly right. In the end, the question is now, I think it shows that we're really at a crossroad now. Either we don't accept what's been happening on what path we're on. And it's probably the MMT path that we're on. And if we don't fully embrace it, I think the fiat system could go down. It could really collapse. And then all the bears and all the Bitcoiners who have been calling for the fiat system to collapse would finally be right. I think that's where we also get the feeling that we're really in this late stage fiat system, with all the debauchery going on, all these vibes and stuff. But then I think personally, maybe that's not how it's going down. I'm not one of these people who really believes that the collapse is imminent. So I'm more on the side, and it's probably, again, probability, I can't say myself for sure, but I would say it's probably that we will accept at some point that we're on this MMT route, and then it will become mainstream, as I said. And then we just have to make sure that we can keep on pulling on this on the right levers, And I think we've already seen so many signs of this. It is, as I said, the financial repression. You have so many more threats that you can pull on there, to make sure money is being funneled into the fiat Ponzi. And then at the same time, we now see the whole stablecoin discussion, that's going on. I mean, that's also another lever that they are trying to pull, where they feel like, okay, we don't maybe need banks that much anymore. We now have stablecoin issuers who can also buy a lot of government bonds, and we now regulate them, through the Genius Act that was just been passed, and that way we funnel money into the entire system. And it's another episode historically that we developed in our book, where we looked at the Central Bank of England, how it was founded, and it was founded the exact same way. It was this company, sort of private, and then the king was looking around for somebody who could finance his wars. And then he stumbled across this banker, a Scottish guy, who was then making him this offer of, look, we have a revolutionary bank here. It's called the Bank of England. It wasn't a central bank back then, but that was its original purpose, And that's then how it got started, through charters. That's sort of legislative acts, regulation that extended privilege after privilege to this bank. And that's how it established. And so I think the same thing is happening today with stablecoins. They are the new central banks. And I think they are sort of the shadow central bank of the future system. And so that's what we're seeing. And so I think CBDCs are another iteration of this, where I think you can make the money flows a lot more controllable, where you can also, as I said in the beginning, you can then look who will spend money on what. You can sort of control this. I think this is all coming, and it's coming to uphold to really uphold the system, because, as I said, that's my last sentence. I'm fully with MMT guys that if we are in the system that we are today, money is not scarce because you can just create it out of thin air. But then what is scarce is human labor, is human productivity, is sort of also the resources. And then what the government has to do, if there's ever more money, prices go up, and you have to ensure that labor and the resources are incentivized to go to the right places. And that's where government will have its mandates, where it will sort of say, okay, these resources now will have to flow there. That's why we see private enterprise morphing evermore with government, Elon Musk and the US being so close to each other. I don't think that's a coincidence, just to make sure that, because money is not a problem, because you can just print it ad infinitum, you have to also make sure you control the resource flows. And in the end, for us, this will mean, as human beings, the normal ones, we will be controlled more, whether through outright control mechanisms or like in a secret way. But that's just going to happen. And so it sounds really dull, but that's why I think we have to be so vigilant, and stuff like Bitcoin is so important to educate people on this. Yeah.
What I really hope that people see is that none of this eventually addresses or is honest about the problem, right? So this is all done to mask the fundamentally flawed money system that we are all now in, right? Like, there's no one that says, well, sorry, we tried this, and eventually we got it became very predatory, lots of wars and stuff like that. Literally how it started, what you just mentioned, right? So usually a ruler of a country would ask their citizens, like, hey, we hate this other country. Do you want to go to war with them? Do you have some money for us and resources and stuff, so we can actually, pay people to fight? And then when this king of England figured out, well, we can just, dilute the money by creating more money, etc., then he didn't really have to ask anyone, which is basically what is happening now, right? And so you said dull. I think it's dark, but
yeah.
It is what is happening, right? And so whether someone listening likes this or not, I think you have to come to terms that this is the reality and that you have to do something about it, right? And you mentioned stable coins. I find that really interesting in a sense that, if the US supposedly goes for a more free market of monies, right? If corporate entities can just create their own stable coins, Walmart coin or whatever was in the news, like these types of corporations can eventually create their own money, but all these tokens have to be backed by US treasuries, which is basically the fiat money, right? So the so-called fiat money, the dollar bills, might not be used in trade between people anymore, right? We would trade Walmart coin or whatever. But on the back end, that would still keep this flawed system alive, right? And so that's kind of the trick they're pulling. And I think whatever you think of that, that's irrelevant. It's more about the signal that you should see, right? Like the signal is they know which path they're on, and this is their attempt at holding that eventual guaranteed end, as has been shown in history. Just keep that off, basically.
Yeah, exactly. As you're saying, I mean, on the stablecoin case, I had an article back in 2019, on Libra, which was like the first stablecoin where they tried something like this. And already back then, I was arguing like, okay, this will become reality. Maybe Libra is way too early, but it's funneling third world money into first world debt, and then so back then, obviously nobody cared. I think some other people like Ricardo were pointing this out, but today exactly this is happening, and it's really because it's another way to finance the Ponzi, and will it probably won't help in the after all, as Saifuddin pointed out in his talk during the Bitcoin Las Vegas conference, that it's probably hard, there even stable coins won't be able to magically fund the entire government so that they won't have to go ever more into debt. So but it's just another lever that they can pull, and so I mean, maybe I can put it this way, just to come across as somebody who's not, I'm like, when I say this, I'm only describing, as you said it yourself, I'm not being prescriptive, I'm being descriptive, I'm just trying to describe what's happening in the world. For me, then, as a person, I mean, I have to be so vigilant. And that's why I say, maybe as an investor, I'm sort of the belief that this all sounds really fatalistically bullish. I see the world's going to shit, so to say, and it's going to be good for my backs because Bitcoin is going to profit off of this for sure. Because more money printing, more money into Bitcoin, and that's why number go up. And then the other more libertarian person in me is like, okay, I have to stay vigilant in terms of what can Bitcoin offer me that I can sort of escape that inevitable controlling narrative that's coming. Is Bitcoin a freedom technology there as well? I can own my own money, I can opt out, I can maybe even with layer 2s on top be private when it comes to financial transactions, at least to some extent. And that's where my libertarian me comes in. And so I have to address all these different me's in me, and really say, okay, what does this mean? And obviously I want to stay put and vigilant because, as I said, what I'm describing here, I think it's coming that way, even if I don't like it. And so I have to try to already set myself up for this by protecting. And I guess Bitcoin and the whole Bitcoin ecosystem is certainly a great spot to be at. To be at the forefront of how to protect yourself against what's coming, not only financially but also just like practically speaking,
So you just said you don't really think that hyper Bitcoinization will happen for some time. Of course, that is something that many people in Bitcoin talk about. In essence, I would describe it as everything in the world will be priced in Bitcoin, as Bitcoin is the best way to value products and services, which I absolutely agree with. The last part, I think the first part, it depends on how bad the fiat road will go, I would say. But yeah, you don't really see this happening anytime soon. And as we just mentioned, with stable coins, etc., governments really tightening their grip on fiat money. Yeah, what are you seeing with that? What makes you so sure about that?
Well, I have to say I'm not sure about anything, so that's why I don't say this with great confidence, But I'm saying this because I feel like I have to give a more nuanced answer, in the sense of when I look at the fiat system as I just described it, I feel like they have so many more aces up their sleeves to kick the can down the road with all these opportunities that we just discussed, and we could go into great more details to really flesh this out, But the thing is, because they have so many more aces to kick the can down the road, I feel like, okay, I don't see the fiat system imploding in the sense that everything will only be Bitcoin and no more fiat money will be there. I think at the same time, hyper-Bitcoinization will happen to those that care, and that those that will all sort of renominate or redenominate their entire lives towards Bitcoin. And I think you are doing it. Other people are doing it. A good example is, for example, Marty Bent, and the people, they've launched now this add-on that you can have on the browser where you can see house prices priced in Bitcoin, all other goods priced in Bitcoin. And I feel like more and more Bitcoiners, and maybe then also at the margin, more and more normal people will become Bitcoiners and will sort of adapt this line of thinking, and they will really go through hyper-Bitcoinization, because at some point they only save in Bitcoin. Maybe at some point they do some transactions also in Bitcoin, paying some suppliers directly in Bitcoin, increasingly living off of Bitcoin, and they will really experience hyper-Bitcoinization. Also because it will happen that Bitcoin in fiat terms will go to 1 million and beyond, just because fiat is sort of hyper inflating into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is like the release valve to suck up all of that excess capital. That being said, I think it will only happen to the people who care. I feel like there will be, as we discussed in the beginning, a bunch of people who are still sort of higher up the food chain in the fiat system. They will live just comfortably in the fiat system. Then you have some people who are just stuck, who have maybe not a great optimistic outlook, and they just tag along in the fiat system, complaining about it all the time, but don't know how to actually leave, don't have the courage to leave, even though they're being presented the solution, which is Bitcoin. I met plenty of these people along the way as well. And so I would say hyper-Bitcoinization, it will happen, but not maybe in the grand scheme of things, like as we usually, or at least as I see people hoping for it, that the entire world will turn to Bitcoin. It is for those who listen. Those who hear, they will listen and they will be better off, but maybe not for all of them. So that's sort of my take on this.
Yeah, very nuanced. No, I think I agree. Unfortunately, I have to say, right? Like it's all these things we talked about, like there is a clear problem. I think we see a clear solution, but yeah, eventually not everyone is interested, although they should be over time. I also think it'll take a lot of time. How do you think AI is making all of this even messier? Like, do you see that as a tool, a threat, both? Like how... I see it as like this parallel path next to fiat money dying, Bitcoin emerging, and then we have this whole AI development going on, right? Like how do you see that impacting what we just talked about?
Yeah, probably also in many different multifaceted ways. I mean, for one thing, I see AI, and that's probably the argument that Jordi Visser will make, that you will have on the pod, I guess, sometime in the future. I had him on my podcast as well, and he was making the argument that AI will make the system, the fiat system, even messier, in the sense it will be ever harder to sort of gauge and measure what's going on, because like we could see labor participation drop off a cliff, but GDP growth still be very much to the right or up to the right, because like all the productivity is coming from AI bots and AI programs being implemented with bigger companies, and so they can still grow their earnings per share and stuff while laying off people at the same time. So that's complicated. At the same time, I believe it could be another force that helps the fiat system limp along a little longer, because like productivity boom could come along, and then it could also, and that's probably goes to Jeff Booth's argument as well, again, because we're getting so much more productive, the government can also print that much more money, and it doesn't really, it doesn't make a difference when it comes to the numbers, even though we would have that much inflation, because productivity growth is also growing that much, it's also sort of levels out, and then you don't really see the entire inflation that's coming along, and that's what I feel like could be another way the fiat system could be upheld again through this one force. But then personally, I think AI, it's so powerful, and I feel like especially the Bitcoiners are all over this again, just because they are sort of naturally curious. They want to figure out what's happening in the world, and so I see a lot of Bitcoiners experimenting with these technologies, and they're individually, I feel like it can be such a great boost to your entrepreneurship, to your solopreneurship. I see it with my podcast. Nowadays a lot of things are automated already through AI, or at least I'm sort of experimenting with this, and that can also really help. So yeah, I'm probably not the right guy to talk to this about in great detail, but I feel like AI will definitely be a very influential force in many aspects, for the good, for the bad. I guess it's always, again, it's nuanced.
Yeah, I love that you highlight Jeff Booth, because I think what I would love to highlight here is that people need to understand that if you have a new technology, or as Jeff Booth says, right, like every technology is inherently deflationary, but I think AI is exponentially deflationary. If you want to measure the productivity gains by a new technology that are deflationary in an inflationary money, you will never really get all the benefits from the deflationary forces of this new technology, right? And so I think what I hope people will understand is that we could be so much further as a society, as humanity, if we didn't before and won't in the future price all these deflationary advancements and productivity gains basically through technology in this inflationary money, right? So I don't know how you feel. We don't have to go into that, but sometimes I feel like we're going backwards, right? Like everything should be cheaper over time, but some things that are now more expensive than like 20 years ago when I was a teenager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that way, and I think people will recognize that we go backwards to some degree.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, as I said, the people who listen and who understand this, they will adopt these type of strategies, and then sort of, as you said, calculating all their prices in Bitcoin to really profit off of this deflationary tendency that AI brings along, and then you can also profit off of this. And so that's very important. And I think this will happen exactly. And for the ones who don't do it, bad luck in the end. And that's why they hopefully come across the chasm and do it the way we hopefully can do it in the future with Bitcoin itself. So that's definitely a great point as well.
Yeah. All right. So I know you have to go in a few minutes, so I wanted to ask you some short questions to wrap it up. How do you personally distinguish between all the noise and the signal in today's world, where there's just so much information, so many options? I mean, and I think that's also why your podcast is called "Less Noise, More Signal." But yeah, how do you do that yourself?
Yeah, I would say it's very hard. It's always sometimes you always only know in hindsight if something has really been signal, obviously, because because by definition, probably because nobody is talking about it, it's still sort of undiscovered and unproven as well. And so you only know in hindsight. But I think one great approach that I use is, as I said, if a lot of people are hating it, if a lot of people are discarding it as something which is just laughable, then I pay attention, and sometimes also if I see like some of the smaller accounts on X really talking about stuff, and pointing to things, that's where I pay attention, because I feel like, yeah, especially when it comes to bigger accounts, and I mean real big accounts on X, you start to do engagement farming. You're not really, just by the incentives, how the thing works, you're probably not really that close to reality anymore. There's a few exceptions like Lynn Alden, like Preston Pish and stuff, but most of the bigger accounts are at some point maybe just, as I said, engagement farming. So that's why I look to the smaller accounts to find the actual signal. And then again, if somebody is really, as I said, hated for the theories that he's pointing or that he's putting forward, and they make at least some initial sense, I want to look at this because then I feel there could be some alpha or signal in there. And that's how I sort of try to distinguish here between signal and noise. But as I said, it's always really hard, and you only know in hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really work, I would say, nowadays, right? But great tip, actually. I fully agree with finding smaller accounts and seeing people really come from a certain expertise or point of view that are just like consistently sharing. I think is also always interesting. So for millennials listening to this, trying to navigate everything that we talked about, what would be your best advice for building their knowledge, their resilience, and become a bit more optimistic as we, wrestle with all of the things that we discussed?
Mm. Yeah, as I said, I mean, for me, what really helped is, as I already framed this term, and it's not framed by me, it's by a colleague of mine on X as well. Rectoimides, I think is his handle. He called that term fatalistic bullishness, and that's what I really like this term, because it's like, even though you see everything that's not going right in the world and you maybe disagree with it, there's always probably some positive side to it. And even with the whole money printing, in the end, I think as we established, they need to keep the system going, and that's why there's opportunities for everyone in there. And so that's the stance or the approach that I'm sort of going for, that I try to see the world with bright eyes, and I see opportunities everywhere. I try to discover them, and that's where I use all the technological tools nowadays that are at our disposal, especially the entire AI LLMs, which are so powerful. One thing that I had to really learn is that as a Bitcoiner, obviously you have this mindset, low time preference. Every dollar or franc or euro that's spent on something which is not Bitcoin is sort of a lost dollar, because like the opportunity costs are so high. I'm still sort of sympathetic to that view, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, these $20 on a Google VO3 account that I can experiment with these video generating tools, come on, it's worth it. I'll have to do it because that's how I develop, and not be really stingy with yourself there. And especially as a Bitcoiner, I feel like that's a problem that I encounter a lot. And so with all the possibilities that are around today, especially for millennials and even younger folks, the whole world is sort of open to you, and you just have to make use of these tools, and then also surround yourself with people that think alike, but then at the same time maybe with some people who don't think alike. That's, as I said, what I do with the podcast as well, where I do sort of interview opposing characters as well. It just sharpens your own understanding of the world. And there's probably many more pieces of advice that I could give, but that's what comes to mind right now.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks. My last question is a question I ask everyone, which is, what is a core belief you will never let go of?
Yeah, a core belief that I will never let go of. It's probably, as I said, that we humans really think we have figured it out, and on all different types of spectras, you know, whether you are from the fiat world, whether you are a Bitcoiner, whether you are a Christian, whatever, you know, you have your core beliefs and you feel like you have figured it out. And there, I think it's always very important to question your own assumption again, just to see where you might have gone astray, or where you're sort of stubborn and you don't really allow yourself to really be influenced by no new information. And so, yeah, that's probably a core belief I will never let go of myself. So just always be open and curious to learn more, also from opposing sides, so to say.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Thanks so much for this great conversation. I think we covered a lot. Hopefully it was helpful for people. And yeah, man, let's stay in touch. Thanks.
Yes, thanks a lot, Bram. Have a good one.
You too. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.